Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Antonio Caridad, Head of Global PartnerOps from Tricentis. Antonio, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Sugata.
We've been going back and forth for a while, so I'm glad that you found some time for us. And I'm super excited to have you at Austin at our event on the panel. So look forward to a great conversation today. There's so much to talk about. I want to say one thing. Maybe it's an advertising for Tricentis. We've been using Tricentis in our QA team. We love it. The QA load has gone down almost by 90% from a labor-wise. It's an amazing software. We're end-to-end fully automated in Azure DevOps. Amazing product. So with that, I want to come back to you. I would love to have you take a minute and introduce yourself to our audience.
Great. Thank you for having me. So I'm an engineer converted into Partnerships Pro. Started my career in telecom engineering. And then at some point, IBM took a chance on me in partnerships. And I've been doing partnerships for, almost 15 plus years at this point. And so I've gone from being a partner manager and managing a bunch of different programs, any kind of flavor of partnerships that you can think of, to now heading partner operations. I made a point of transitioning my career into RevOps and partner operations. So that's what I'm doing now.
That's amazing. So let's go back a little bit, right? What made you switch from engineering to partner?
That's a great question. So I spent many years in telecom in Mexico. I'm originally from Mexico City. And engineering per se never did, even though I'm a telecom engineer, right? But I did more corporate finance and things like that. And it was at a certain point that I came to the US to get my MBA. And it was from my MBA that I got an internship at IBM. And IBM said, like, hey, Antonio, you'll be great at this thing we call channel partnerships, channel sales. And I jumped into the opportunity and I never looked back. Spent 10 years at IBM doing that, then 3 years at an Australian telco, and then now with Tricentis. So it was just IBM took a chance on me. I gave partnerships a chance because I didn't know what that was. I had never been in sales. I had never been in partnerships. And I never looked back. I fell in love with it. And here I am.
That's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about like when you switch from telco, from an engineering side to the partner side. How did the ecosystem look like? When was it? How did it look like? What was the composition and what company was it?
Great question. So I started in IBM, right? And when I started in partnerships back then, I started with traditional resale and distribution, right? So we were working with the major distributors back then, Avnet, when Avnet still existed, Arrow, Ingram, Tech Data before buying Avnet, and a few others. And then I started with an ecosystem of about 4,000, 4,500 partners, resellers across the world. So it was mostly that. It was resale and distribution, a little bit old school. You still find a lot of that in the industry, especially in certain industries like telco. But that's how it looked like. It was very, very resale driven.
So if it was resale driven, then distribution played a role. So were those the two major sort of segments? You have distribution and channel partners, essentially.
Correct. At the beginning, correct. Yeah. I mean, then we had little differences and nuances in between them. You had the beginning of MSPs, but also we had different programs based on what they were doing, value added reselling, long term commitments. We ran different kind of plays around our resellers regionally, and then also by segment.
Were there any specific product category you managed, or it was the entire sort of resale channel?
Inside of IBM, it was the entire thing. I was part of Partner World. I was brand agnostic. Back then, I can't remember because that's almost 15 years ago, right? But I can remember how many products I have. I can tell you by the end of my tenure at IBM, by the end of the 10 years at IBM, that I was doing more tech partnerships, less resale. I was working with, I think it was about 16 different brands, IBM brands, across 190 something products. It was a big umbrella. And what we were doing at that certain point is that we were kind of like, let's say, the partnership team, but we did partnerships internally with the IBM brands, but also externally with different partners, right? So we were the middleman between those groups.
So if you talk about those four groups, right, that itself, I mean, IBM, there's no such thing as a product. It's thousands of products, hundreds of business lines. And that's where the rubber meets the road. So let's talk a little bit about, maybe at simplification's sake, maybe 5 types of partners. And I'll simplify based on what you just said. You have distribution, you have resell,
In
and
in
yeah, tenure at IBM.
So yeah,
Distribution. Yeah. Go ahead.
distributors,
Categories.
distributors, resellers, support providers, and solution providers, where you start to get more into embed and things like that. We did a lot of tech partnerships. My biggest tenure inside of IBM were tech partnerships, and so a lot of integrations. So those are five. But I mean, I worked with agencies, I worked with affiliate, I worked with referral, and then a lot of times people tend to categorize, strategic GSIs and strategic partners and then resellers and things like that. In my opinion, that's apples to oranges. GSIs and MSPs and VARs and SIs are types of partners. Strategic partners is internal categorization, right? You should never put strategic partners, GSIs, and VARs in the same breath because it's apples to oranges, right? But we work with many, many, many different types of partners there.
From our side, this podcast will be listened to by many of our customers, right? And we predominantly serve enterprise, but we also have a growing segment in mid market.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody in mid market want to be like you. So what I'd love to do, maybe take a couple of minutes, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, walk us through in your mind these types of partners and differences in them when it comes to partner ops perspective.
That's a great question, and I think that you might find that that might vary from company to company, because you will have companies that will pull some MSPs or RSIs into a GSI category. You will have companies that sometimes tend to pull hyperscalers and GSIs together. But in the grand scheme of things, you have value added resellers, right? That purely what they do is normally they will take your product and they will resell it, right? They will put the customer on their paper, they will take indemnity and liability, and they will resell your product at, for a given margin or for a given rev share or something like that, right? Then you have MSPs. MSPs tend to get more into a little bit of an embed game, right? Where you are papering yourself with the MSP, and the MSP what will do is what they will package services around your offering and provide a package offering to a customer, right? In those cases, depending on the MSP that you might be working with, you might or you might not know who the customer is behind that, right? And so you start getting a little bit into more of intricacies of like who's actually using the product, who's actually managing it, and et cetera, right? Then you get into like the GSIs, and the GSIs you have a breadth of who they are and what they are, or SIs in general, right? The GSIs is just global system integrators, right? But you have SIs that go from the consultancy side all the way to implementing, and in some cases you get the ones that actually add service on top of it, right? And so it depends on what you're doing to see what kind of like SI or GSI you're going to be working with, depending on what they do. Because, for example, the consultancies in the, let's say, the beginning of the funnel, companies are going to be normally more referrals. They're not going to resell your product. They're not going to integrate your product. They're not going to deliver your product. They're rarely going to add actual technical services on top of it. They're just consultancies, right? And then you move on to the end of the spectrum where they're doing this kind of thing, right? And so it depends. Some of the global GSI will actually do the whole thing, right? But some will not. And then you start getting into other companies like hyperscalers, right? Which are, the AWSs, the Googles, the Azures of the world, where depending on what you do with them, most likely you're going to do something around selling through their marketplace or embedding through their marketplace or doing, for example, US, it's private offers and public offers and things like that, which are special deals. But it really depends on how you are interacting with them. At the end of the day, all of these partners could also potentially work with you as referral companies if they don't want to take on the responsibility and they're just like pushing deals to you. And then also some of these, especially with the hyperscalers, you might get into a co-sell kind of situation, right? Where you're sharing leads each way, you're sharing revenue, or you're sharing some sort of incentives each way, but you're sharing opportunities and leads and basically working them together, right? So the motion and the type of partner might vary very differently from company to company, and that's what I've experienced, right? From company to company, I've worked differently with the Accentures of the world. I've worked differently with the AWSs of the world. I've worked differently with even IBM, that I used to be a part of IBM, and now IBM is a partner of mine, right?
So let's kind of build on that. I really want to build on that framework, and especially with your background in partner ops. I want to take a few minutes. Let's go through maybe, three broad categories of partners, or maybe four, and then we'll go through a life cycle of PartnerOps from recruit, onboard, enable, co-market, co-sell, incentivize, etc. Right? So let's talk about three categories. Let's talk about affiliates. Let's talk about resellers or VARs, distributors, like the thing companies that have fulfillment motions. Let's talk about service providers, right? And then let's talk about alliance partners. So we'll go through each at a time. So if I'm a mid-market company trying to
Can
grow up,
we?
sure, we can
Yeah.
keep it. Okay. All right. So let's start with the second and third category. So let's start with the fulfillment category, the where you came from in the IBM days. It's
Mm-hmm.
a fulfillment channel. That's where everything came from. So let's start with that. Then we'll talk about system integrators,
Cool.
and we'll talk about the service providers. So let's talk a little bit about if we're trying to build a fulfillment channel,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe you have to do that in the hardware space right from the beginning because somebody has to carry your inventory to some extent. Maybe software, I can wait a little bit. Walk us through in those two motions when it comes to partner ops, right? Let's talk about building, right? How do you go about building an ecosystem?
That's a great question. And it starts with having product market fit and knowing who your customer is, right? Because once you understand who is your customer, why they're buying your product, at what point they're buying your product, how are you solving a problem for them, and how you differentiate yourself from potential competition, that's when you can start looking at who are the companies that surround that customer, right? Who is also selling potential things to those customers, or the customers are buying from them, that can become partners of yours, right? And that's where they can help you fill gaps. They can help you reach those customers that you might not be able to reach and expand your total addressable market, and they can help you basically become an extension of your sales team, right? And so that's where you can start identifying, like, okay, if you have, you can start building what in partner operations we call an IPP, right? An ideal partner profile. And so companies that service that total addressable market, companies that have complementary and additive products to yours, companies that help you fill the gaps that you might not be able to fill. Maybe you don't do that, maybe you just don't have the capabilities. Companies that can allow you to reach customers that you wouldn't be able to reach, or that you don't have any influence on, or whatever. Companies that are excited to partner with you. And then finally, and most importantly, is companies where you have a better together story, right? Where you have a story, a very compelling story, coming to the customer. It's like, why me and them and us work together to provide a solution to the customer that addresses their needs, right? And basically helps them. And so that's how you can start building that ecosystem where you are now. If you want to start getting into other places, like different markets and things like that, it's the same thing, right? In the different market, you might not understand the market, you might not speak the language, you might not know the culture. And that's where partners can help you, not only through all the things that we've just talked to, but these are additives to that. Like, let's say that an American company wants to get into, let's say, China, right? Or maybe China is a bad example because sometimes it's very hard. But let's say Brazil. What companies can help you fill and meet those categories and all those things that we talked about inside the ideal partner profile, but also speaks the language, knows the market, has the contacts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So those are the things that you need to start identifying through your network and through your contacts about how you can actually get into a market.
Awesome. So let's double click on the channel, sort of the fulfillment part of the business, right?
Mhm.
And we'll cover the managed service provider and system integrator separately. So if we stay on the channel, like the fulfillment business, Jamie Bain talks about all the time the seven things that are being sold together.
Mhm.
So when you look at your IBM days versus now, is it kind of mandatory today that you have to build a fulfillment motion with the channel, but you also need to put alliance motions together? So you have this solution bundle seven that was not necessarily a requirement 10 or 15 years back because people bought things separately.
I think distribution is important. Fulfillment is important because if you don't have a way to fulfill, if you don't have a way to distribute your product, you're dead in the water. Even if you have a fantastic product, right? You don't have a way to actually get your product to reach the customers and reach the people that are going to buy your product, right? So I think these days it's equally important. Yes, to answer that question, yes, it's equally important, and that's where having that network of partners that allow you to fill those gaps and address those needs from a strategy perspective, from a reach perspective, from a distribution perspective, from a fulfillment perspective, it's critical. If you cannot do it, like there's a phrase, I don't know who coined it, but it's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's a reality. Like, you might, in your own little tiny market, in your own little tiny patch, you might be able to do everything, right? But once you want to start scaling, once you want to start growing, once you want to start getting into other markets and other places, if you try to do it alone, more likely than not is maybe you can, but you're gonna burn through cash. You're gonna burn through cash, not only in marketing, not only in sales, not only in operations, et cetera, right? And you might start getting out of your core expertise, right? You might have to start building things that are not part of your DNA, are not part of what you do, and that's where you can, a lot of companies lose their way, right? They try to boil the ocean, they try to do everything by themselves, and at that point, it's, you have to decide where are my resources better spent.
So that's a great point to sort of again double click on. So talk to us sort of, let's say 100, 200, $300 million company, have direct sales, building an ecosystem. So it's an emerging capability, not a mature capability like Tricentis or IBM.
Mhm.
But in that case, if you're designing your organization, right, and you have a value prop, you may even have an alliance stack, 6, 7 other vendors that you sell and bundle together. What does the organization typically look like? Who is in the organization from a global coverage, regional coverage? Can you kind of walk us through a little bit?
That's a great question, and you'll see that that kind of tends to vary, right? You normally will have, once you get to reach that size of company, 300, 400 million, you're going to have a CRO, right? More likely than not, that CRO will have a partnership leader. And normally that partnership leader is at the same level as the sales leaders, right? So good or bad, you might start to get some silos of the partner team working on one side, the sales team working on another, but ultimately you have sales teams and partner teams, right? And what you want to do is have them working together. And normally what happens is that those sales teams tend to be bigger, tend to be larger than the partner managers. Depending on the size of the company, normally maybe you have a ratio of one partner manager to 10, 5 or 10 AEs. I think that's a healthy ratio. If it gets a little bit bigger, it tends to be, it can be chaotic, right? Because you have one partner manager trying to work with 25 AEs, that can become really hairy really fast, right? And it's the same on the opposite side, where you have like partners, and as you grow, you might have a partner manager that manages 5, 10 partners, 15 partners, 25 partners. I think that's the max, depending on the size of the partners, obviously. But once you start getting past 25, that's where like there's not enough hours in the day of a partner manager to do all that, right? Now, if you're lucky, those organizations will normally have a sales ops team. If they're mature enough, they might have RevOps on top of sales ops. And if you're very, very, very lucky, partnerships will have PartnerOps. That is still very nascent, and most teams will not have PartnerOps.
So I want to go exactly there where you went. So let's step back, right? Let's talk. You talked about division of labor. There's a ratio. Let's
Mhm.
say 10 to 1, and then build on that ratio. Let's talk about task separation between those two roles,
Mhm.
and then KPIs. Like, let's just take a unit of 10 to 1. How would you separate who is focused on what, and how do you measure outcome?
That's a good question. So, first of all, you need to make sure before we dive into that, for the sales and partner teams to work together, you need to have compensation and like compensation alignment and channel neutrality, right? If sales is disincentivized of working with partners, or partners are disincentivized of working with the sales team, and there's conflict, it's never going to work, right? So let's assume that you have that you've solved for channel conflict, and that they're working together, right? Normally what happens is that the partner team manages the partner perspective from relationship, and so you have partner managers creating multi-threaded relationships and multi-threaded cadences with not only the marketing team connecting marketing to marketing, but every rep or a lot of reps within the partner working with the reps that they're aligned with and making sure that opportunities are being worked on. The partner managers are supposed to make sure that they have leaders in the mix, and then they are the ones that are driving alignment, right? They're the ones that are building sales plans with the partner. They're the ones that are building marketing plans with the partner along with the marketing teams. They're the ones that are creating goals, and if things are working correctly, you have MOUs and you have SLAs with the partner to make sure that you're working together and that there's alignment on deliverables and things like that, right? Once you have that established, that's where, once you start having opportunities as a partner manager, you want to establish a cadence with all of the AEs that you're working on to make sure that all the opportunities that you're working with partners, or that you're building, ideally you're bringing partners into opportunities to help you close opportunities as well, that all of that is happening and that you're working on, right? That cadence should be weekly by weekly with every AE to make sure that you're proactively looking at opportunities. Now, sometimes things fall through the cracks, sometimes that doesn't happen, but that's ideally the kind of like work and the kind of things that you should be able to see, right? And in terms of KPIs, if a partner is engaged, if a partner is bringing you deals, if you're involving partners in deals, if your partner is getting enabled, if your partner is excited about working with you and again bringing you opportunities and doing enablement and asking you for collateral and creating events and creating campaigns and running pipeline gen or pipeline activation activities and things like that, that's when you're on the good path of partnership, right? And normally what will follow is pipeline gen, deal revenue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But if all of that is failing, if you see partners that are not engaged, if you see partners that are not bringing deals, or you're not involving partners in deals, or you involve them and the partner is just not responding, that's where things start falling through the cracks.
Okay, so I have a question now, specifically these three big things that you or mentioned that has big O's in them: revenue ops, sales ops, and partner ops. In your mind, because you have worked in this large organization and significant level of complexity, if you kind of come to an abstract level, can you define the separation of these three and where they are connected together? Revenue ops, sales ops, and partner ops.
Good question. So revenue ops is the engine or the team that will allow you to uncover revenue opportunities and productivity, right? And ideally, sales ops and partner ops are subsets of that. So RevOps sits on top, and again, the main purpose of RevOps is increase productivity and making sure that you have, through increasing productivity and through data analysis and through process creation and through the finding of efficiencies and all of that, is that you are able to uncover more opportunities and more revenue, right? Now, sales ops and partner ops they're similar teams, they're just servicing different teams, right? Sales ops is a team that is normally going to service the direct sales side of the team from, you know, a planning perspective, a budget perspective, a comp plan perspective, metrics, alignment, opportunity generation, and making sure that everything is flowing correctly from a process perspective, right? On the flip side, you have partner ops. And so partner ops does the exact same thing or similar things, just with the partner team. Now, on top of that, sales teams have partner programs. Sales teams don't have partner portals. Sales teams don't have those things that come along with partnerships, right? And so those are things that are added on top of a partner ops team, which is to manage potentially assign and manage a partner program, create and manage a partner portal, making sure that partner experience is top of mind, and all of that. Another thing that sometimes or normally doesn't fall in sales ops is customer experience, right? You normally have in companies customer experience teams that are different. At least from my perspective and from my experience, the very few people that are doing partner ops out there tend to be partner experience people as well, right? So it just more things get piled on. But again, partner ops is still not a thing. It's still very nascent. More and more we hear it. More and more it's becoming a thing. I'm excited about it, but it's still very nascent.
Very much so. That's why we're trying to create this framework of recruit, onboard, enable, co-market, co-sell, incentivize, and accelerate as a framework, because this whole ops framework that came from Six Sigma became Lean Sigma, became Lean Ops. So there has always been a cadence through process, and it has not really, existed. I was actually talking to Vineet earlier about this whole notion of evolution of ops. So it's very, very exciting time to be in this industry. I do have a question going back to one function
Mhm.
and that it did not mention, and maybe it's embedded in one of these, three: revenue ops, sales ops, or partner ops. Where is marketing ops in your mind? Is it part of revenue ops? Is it part of sales ops and partner ops? Is it a separate function by itself? How does it overlay? What's the framework?
That's a good question. I think marketing ops tends to be separated. It normally falls under marketing if marketing happens to have a marketing ops person, right? A lot of times you see marketing folks, just like partner folks that don't have partner ops, that don't have marketing ops, taking the ops upon themselves to do, right? But marketing ops, to your point, it's another very, very important thing. Can you put it under RevOps? Absolutely. But more likely than not, and normally what I've seen is that the teams that have marketing ops tend to have it separated from RevOps, just because it's not, even though it's part of the go-to-market engine, it's just marketing that tends to have a little bit more control there. Why? Because there's less ops in a sense, and I'm making a cardinal sin of mine, which is like people talking about ops that just think about process and data. But marketing ops tends to work a little bit more in events, in campaigns, in webinars, in, well, they normally have field marketers, but also in terms of, handling budgets around MDF, around campaign generation, around things like that. And so just it's a different kind of thing that normally sales ops and rev ops are, the sales ops and partner ops don't tend to see that, and that's why normally you see it separate. And just to give it a spin, you also sometimes have retention ops or customer success ops, right? Again, depending on the size of the company, but that's another function that could be separated out of sales ops and partner ops.
So let's go back to our roots. Both of us have been engineers. So when you think about, 10, 15, for sure 20 years ago, when you coded, you went through this waterfall model, right? You took your customer requirements, you kind of disappeared. As a product manager, you built PRDs out, and then engineer, punched out codes, went through QA, then you released, and then the feedback cycle started, right?
Mhm.
Everything changed with DevOps, right? And everything changed with Agile. Everything changed with tools like Tricentis. Like I can think about our organization, we used to have somewhere around 18 to 20% dedicated QA resources, right? Those resources are gone. They're embedded in teams. They are part of the Agile teams, right? We have a full stack team. So as you think forward, Ian Beecroft at South by Southwest, in Austin, he mentioned organizations have been designed around data and skills.
Mhm.
As skills become more creativity and adaptability related versus knowledge related, because AI will give us that, and insights become data related, those organizational boundaries are going to go away, right? Sales, marketing, customer success. And you and I have lived through that from waterfall to agile, right? There is no such thing as, these separate functions. It's all together under a product umbrella.
Mhm.
So knowing in the space that you're in, this incredible engineering space that Tricentis is driving, if you have to abstract that onto the front end, right? Just for amusement's sake, where do you think this thing could go? Are we going to have all of these boundaries, or there'll be one big thing called revenue ops and it's going to amalgamate? How does this thing play out?
That's a good question. And I don't know that I have a great answer for it. I can tell you that things that I'm starting to hear around the industry is the beginning of this go to market engineer role, right? And these are roles that are sitting under RevOps. These are operational and data people that understand process, that understand how things work, that understand how sales motions work, that are in sales cycles, that understand the nature of partners and being involved in an opportunity and so forth, but that at the same time are able to understand the intricacies of the tech stack needed to manage all of this, right? And by that, I mean not only the tools that you normally see around sales, like, I don't know, Six Sense, Info, and things like that, or revenue intelligence, or even call recording and data, but also the introduction of AI, right? At the end of the day, AI is going to need somebody to drive it, right? Until AI is able to drive itself and everybody becomes obsolete at that point, you're still going to need a conductor of AI, right? And I think that's where go-to-market engineers come from a RevOps and from a go-to-market engine perspective, because they're the ones that are going to know how everything works, but also be able to drive the tools to be able to get the right outcomes. The important thing, and one of the things that everybody tends to forget, is that you cannot just plug in AI into something. If that process is bad, if that process is flawed, all you're gonna do is exacerbate the issue, right? Bad inputs, bad outputs. And so you always need to have a proper foundation. And who is going to build that foundation? Those go-to-market engineers are going to build that foundation for you to add on the proper tools that are going to allow you to scale. So I think that's maybe where it's going. I don't know if that's a great answer. I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully it did.
No, that's amazing because I can tell, from our own experience, the engineering journey that we had on the product side, how we do QA, the principles of it, like what we need to test is still there.
Mm-hmm.
But how we actually do it has completely changed because of tools like Tricentis, right? Fundamentally. And that has impacted how the organization is designed. The velocity has increased substantially. Cost of QA has gone down possibly 100-fold. So, and it's no longer a waste, it's an insight because the developer itself is building, testing, and releasing versus waiting for someone 6 months later to say you got buggy code, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that will very likely will transform on the front end also. I do want to come back. We have about 10 minutes. These two other types of partners. So take this framework that you just went through, RevOps, Sales Ops, Marketing Ops, Partner Ops, apply that to these two other types of motion, managed service providers or managed security providers,
Mm-hmm.
and then the SIs in broadcast, including GovEd, Fed, if we have to bucket everything in the SIs category. Can you walk us through composition of those organizations, tools, platforms around those two partner motions?
So for the MSP side, normally whatever you build for, if you have a resale channel or a resale motion, let's not use the word channel, because channel tends to have a bad connotation these days. But if you have a resale motion, normally what you do with the MSPs tends to be similar, right? Because at the end of the day, an MSP is going to take your product and it's going to do just add services to it and then manage on behalf of somebody, right? And so at that point, they're pricing to a customer in a different way. But ultimately, what you build for MSPs and VARs, at least from my experience, tends to be similar. The only way where it's not similar is if those MSPs are truly embedding your product and reselling it as part of a bigger product, right? Not only adding services, but let's say that it's like a car part. Like you manufacture tires, and then Audi is going to sell the whole car, right? And and in that case, when you get into a bad models, that's where your contracts and your incentives tend to be a little bit different, because you normally lose a little bit of control over whatever you are selling, right? Especially depending on if you live in the software world or in the SaaS world or in other worlds, right? So from that perspective, for against MSPs and VARs, it tends to be similar, but the nuances start when you start getting into embed. Now, from an SI perspective, that's where it starts getting interesting, right? Because that's where you truly need to understand how you're interacting with your partners. And so, in many cases, you're going to have agreements where the partner has a lot of flexibility, right? It's not just purely you're reselling or you're purely embedding or you're purely doing something. Like SIs tend to do a little bit of everything, or more specific things. And so you start getting into, how do I build a motion that allows for little friction for the partner to do whatever they want to do, but for me to still understand what are they doing in order for me to properly price it, right? And so and properly work it, right? And so from that perspective, you just need to make sure that you have the controls and the proper processes to understand, like, hey, the SI is purely referring me business, and all they need is a kickback or an incentive of some sort, right? Or the SI is actually going to resell me, or the SI is embedding, or the SI is actually going to deliver, right? And so in that case, when you start getting into more of those things, you need to have the technical capabilities to train them, for them, because they're doing many things, for them to be able to not only speak and talk about your product correctly and sell your product correctly, but make sure that they are ready for delivering and for implementing and for actually taking your product and ensuring that time to value of your product is there. Because ultimately, if that's not there, if they're doing a bad job at implementing your product or delivering your product or adding services on top of your product, it reflects bad on you, right? Because you didn't train them properly. And so it just starts getting a little bit more complex, and it depends on how many avenues or how many ways of working with partners you have, right? Again, you can do resale, you can do referral, you can do tech partnerships, etc. Now, if you're starting to get into other things with SIs around, for example, tech partnerships and implementation, you need to have the proper, not only agreements, but the proper teams on both sides of the equation to make sure that you're doing a proper integration, right? And then once you integrate, once you have, let's say, a joint solution that is going to the customer, who is the one delivering, who is the one ensuring that this is working correctly for the customer, etc. Because in some cases it might be your team, and in some cases it might be their team, and are both teams capable of doing that?
Okay, great. So we now talked about, three groups of partners. We talked
Mm-hmm.
about sort of a channel fulfillment, like a resale based motion.
Mm-hmm.
Then we talked about a managed service provider where they're embedding your product to provide an augmented service, some sort of, whether it's managed service or managed security or managed networking, whatever that is. And then you have a third, system integrators, who are basically could be all of the above together, and locally, globally, in federal government, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a $1 billion company, you're going to market, half goes through direct, you're designing the other half that goes through this partner ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
How do you design the organization roughly? Let's say ACVs float between 50 to 300K, kind of a range.
Well, it depends on. I mean, obviously, at the beginning, you're going to start being a very direct company, right? Very, very few companies start saying by, I'm gonna be 100% partner driven, right? But so you're probably going to have initially a sales team that is very focused on your ICP, your ICP, your ICP, and that's about it, right? But it's through, once you introduce a partner leader, a partner team that is going to grow a partner motion within your team. One of the things that you need to understand is, before you actually do that, is like, do you have a set of potential companies that you can partner with? And we talked about an IPP earlier, right? Do you have a set of, like, it's not just going out and saying like, I want XYZ to be my partner. Like, what are the reasons? Why, what is in there for them to become a partner with you, right? Like a partner of yours. Like, always ask yourself what's in it for them. And this has to be always not a zero sum game, but a win win, right? And especially a triple win, which is a customer wins, a partner wins, and then you win. If those first two don't happen, you don't win, right? And so once you start actually identifying those partners, that's where your partner leader, one of their primary missions and one of their primary tasks within your organization and internally is educational, right? It's working with the sales team to help them understand, look, a partner is going to cut our CAC in half. Normally, sales teams don't care about that, but marketing does, right? A partner is going to speed up our cycles. Why? Because they already have built relationships with those customers. So you don't have to go alone. A partner can help us, right? A partner is going to, more likely than not, because they're adding services or they're adding something to yours, you have a better together story, more likely than not, your deal size is going to grow, right? And then also because you're working with companies that already have established relationships with all of these customers, more likely than not, your win rates are going to increase as well, right? So from a sales perspective, if I have a a partner manager coming to me and saying like, hey, I can make your life easier, your win rates go higher, your deals are bigger, and you meet your targets faster and you attain quota faster, And guess what? Also, your deals are faster. Very few sales teams, there's very few salespeople are going to say no, right? Unless you're not educating properly, right? So that's where you start embedding little by little that partner motion and making sure that sales is aligned with you. But again, as we said earlier, the channel neutrality has to be there. The sellers, at the end of the day, and most importantly, compensation drives behavior. If a seller is not incentivized to work with a partner, if a sales, for example, let's say if for every $100 they can close by themselves, they close $70 with a partner, guess what? I'm going to focus on how I close, how I meet my targets, and how I make quota faster, right? So I'm going to focus on the deals that are $100 out of $100, not on 70 out of 100. So you need to make sure that compensation is there, that channel neutrality is there, that there's no conflict. And it's the same on the marketing side, right? If you are driving events where partners are bringing you leads, or bringing your customers, or you're doing webinars and all of that, and the credit is going all to the partner team or purely to the marketing team, guess what? The teams are not going to collaborate, right? So foundationally, from an operational perspective, you need to make sure that there's alignment. And then obviously that from a operational perspective, that the processes are there, right? That you're making things easy for everybody to work together.
That's amazing. I wish we had a day, Antonio, but I'm really looking forward to the panel, at Austin. It'll be great to have you there. But before we wrap up, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
When you think about next 12 to 18 months, what excites you the most?
I'm going to be a little bit selfish here. You and I were talking a little bit earlier about the emergence of partner operations, right? Last year in my career, I decided to move away from the sales side of the equation into RevOps, into PartnerOps, which is what I'm doing today. My engineering mind always drove me to this side. It's always been a passion of mine. And so what really excites me about the next 18 to 24 months is the immersion, how PartnerOps is going to grow, right? It's not a thing quite yet. You do have a few folks out there in the industry talking about partner ops and partner ops, like Aaron Howerton, like Will Taylor, like Rachel Johnson, and a couple of folks out there. But the reality is that it's not a thing, but you see it more and more and more. More people are asking about it. More people are needing it. More people are requesting a partner ops person. Why? Because sales has sales ops. Marketing sometimes have marketing ops. Partner teams rarely get to have partner ops. And so why is that? Like, teams have to realize that a partner team cannot do everything by themselves. If I showed you, I have a slide that Jason Yarborough and I called the fear inducing slide, because it's all the things that must happen as a partner manager, right? As a partner leader. And guess what? Either those things are happening and your partner managers are not spending 80 to 90% of their time with partners, or they're spending 80 to 90% of their time with partners, and those things are not happening. So one, you cannot have it both ways. And so that's what excites me. It's the emergence of the partner ops role in the industry, as partner teams and as companies realize that they truly need partnership teams to succeed in order for the whole company to succeed.
Well, with that amazing note, we're going to wrap today. Again, looking forward to having you at Austin. It's been an incredible conversation. Thank you for finding time for us. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you, Sugata. I appreciate it. I'm very excited to see you in Austin and to see friends like Vineet and friends like Eleanor Thompson. So excited to host you in my city very soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.